Let me just find my notes because we have things to say before the meeting starts. Okay, so first off, if you've seen any of my emails from the past couple of weeks or have been like around, you should know that we're having elections next week. And so if you want to run for eBoard, the positions open are president, vice president, treasurer, and event coordinator. We have a new Discord channel in the events chat called Election. So there you would need to post your name and what position you're running for, or positions if you want to run for more than one. Yeah, that's it. It's a lot of fun. You get to manage the club, you get to sort out activities, do all that fun stuff. There was another announcement. We're also looking for people to do presentations like this one. So if you have a topic that you feel you're adequately prepared to talk about for more than half an hour, hit us up. We'd love to hear from you about what you're passionate about. Yeah. And I think I posted something in the chat for a game jam that's coming up, I think next weekend. So check that out if you're interested. That's it for announcements.
All right, there's a slight chance that I haven't timed this presentation. I have no idea how long it will go, but there's a lot of slides, but there's not a lot of words on those slides. So let's see. So if you know me, you might have known that I was doing a mentorship program last semester with Ubisoft. Oh, we'll post the recording on our website. Yeah, I was in a mentorship with Ubisoft. They picked me to do this challenge where I wish this worked. There we go. Nope. Cool. Where I had to design a character for Rainbow Six Siege. This isn't character design as like drawing a character, even though I do like doing that. This is character design from more of a mechanics stance. So the main focus of this challenge was to pick an audience that wasn't already in Rainbow Six Siege and build a character for that audience. And those of you who don't know what Siege is a tactical 5v5 shooter where some people are on the attack side, some people are on the defense side, and they have game modes where you have to try to like break into the house and like defuse a bomb or something. So that's kind of the main gameplay. Usually the matches start out, I don't remember the exact timing, but in the beginning of the match, there's a setup time for the defense team, and then there's kind of like a spying time for the attack team, where the attack team will send out a little drone that'll go around the house and like ping where different people are, and they're trying to find like a bomb or a hostage before the match starts. After that, the match starts, and they all start attacking each other, and once you're dead in that game, you're dead. So this challenge had 3 phases. First one was to pick an audience and then kind of be broad with your design and like start to show where you want to go with it. Second phase was to go into more detail with the operator. And the third one was just get interrogated by Ubisoft about your design and answer questions on the spot. So the first step to this process was picking an audience, but what if we ignored that? What if we didn't do the prompt right? The first thing I had to do was a bunch of research. So I had to check out the operator list, and I was like, oh, there's like a handful of operators. It shouldn't be that bad to run through them. There are 58 operators in Rainbow Six Siege. 58. And I'm supposed to find something that stands out from those 58 operators and make something new. There are so many operators that the site breaks trying to show how many operators are available. But here's like a good idea of what the attack is, that the attacker cast is. And everybody has like their own skill set and loadout. Here's the defense side. Again, so many characters that, you know, you just can't see some at the end. So With each operator, there's different classes. There's an armor class, speed, rating, player difficulty. Every character has their own set of weapons, unique play styles and abilities, their own roles and sub roles. So some operators might be more geared towards gathering intel, while some might be more geared towards roaming around the atmosphere. Some operators might be designed to specifically target people who roam. There's a lot of sub rules. And again, there's 58 of these characters. So you take that and you take that number, and there's a lot of things you need to look at. So when I was researching operators, I just watched like a giant video where the dev explained every single operator that they had at the time, and they actually explained some of their design goals with some of the operators, which was helpful. It's really good to kind of like dig for those videos first, because it kind of cuts your time and you don't have to play like hours upon hours of Siege, especially when you might suck at it at first because it has a high learning curve. I learned that the characters weren't actually hyper realistic, which surprised me because I thought that was like a design pillar for them, where they had to be somewhat grounded towards reality. But then I learned that there was a character that could turn invisible. So that basically opened things up. I also learned that there's two characters, right? There's an attacker and a defender. They are sisters. And in the game, if you kill the sister, as a sister, you get bonus points. This is something that is actually in the game. I learned this from watching the video. Also, one of the sisters is married with a 2-year-old. War games, am I right? So, typical Thanksgiving, Kenny, no. So after I checked out the operator lists, I had to play Rainbow myself and try to see if anything pops out to me, anything feels out of place. I played Rainbow Six Siege for the first time in like 2016. I didn't play it for long. I only played it that one night. I was kind of discouraged. I mean, I was using voice chat, which isn't the most fun thing to do as a woman playing games. So that wasn't so great. That wasn't encouraging. And also I was just dying a lot and it wasn't a great atmosphere. But I recently picked it up again for this challenge. I realized I liked it more. But I did learn a few things. One thing was I mained Ela. I figured out I had a main, but that was probably not what I was supposed to figure out. I was supposed to play a lot of characters, but I also wanted to get good at the game a little bit to understand the mechanics and situations. I enjoy defense, which was weird because usually in games I'm more of like an aggressive player. So I like to like hunt down people and stuff like that. Granted, Siege does give you options to like roam as a defender and knock off people. But I thought it was weird that I liked defense so much. When I was playing attack, I wished that I could play it a little more cautiously instead of like rushed. Maybe it was because I was a new player. But I just wish there was something that could let me be a little more strategic, add a little more thoughts to my moves. And then, yeah, I wish I had more time on attack. I didn't really feel like I was getting a chance to learn the game because I died fast. So they didn't send me their design pillars, so I kind of had to guess them. There was a chance that I could have maybe emailed somebody for them, but it also wasn't that hard to try to guess what they were. If you don't know what a design pillar is, a design pillar is basically like a rule that the game has to follow when creating stuff for the game. Like it's basically a law that can't be broken. So here are some of the pillars that I figured out. You only have one life in Rainbow. You have to have two-phased combat. Collaboration is a very important feature to the game that devs really want to use. But again, if you are a woman playing games on a mic, that is so hard to do. Operators have unique abilities. That's important. And the operators have to introduce new gameplay strategies. If they didn't add anything new to the team comps, what's the point in adding them? You want to mix things up. So, step -1, forget the main objective and pretend you are the audience. Don't do this. Don't. So my first operator idea was to make a character that can make the player hallucinate. The player would hit a trap, and they would see and hear people who weren't there. Rainbow relies on senses. Listening is like a pretty big feature. And I wanted to like play with that and challenge that. I thought that was an interesting thing to kind of play with. Yeah, and some of the main things I wanted to do with it was to challenge players' trust with the game, because again, you have to rely on senses heavily. You gotta listen, you gotta look for like damage and stuff like that. You're constantly looking for movement while you're infiltrating or defending. And I thought it would be cool if there was like a trap that might trick you. And you know, I figured there had to be an audience for this character because I was interested in it and I thought it would be really fun to play. Don't do that. That's not entirely sound. And also I learned that I was going to have problems basing it off of that logic. So while I was still doing research, I decided to check out what players have been asking for. Reddit said I was valid in wanting a character that hallucinates a player. I asked people online, they thought it was cool. And then I asked my brother, who's obsessed with Rainbow and was just a random source for me to have. Thanks, Kenny, for shouting out to my brother. And then I started having second thoughts about my operator because as fun as the idea was, it didn't feel solid. I liked the possibilities with it, but at the end of it all, it just felt similar to like how a flashbang would play out, and it didn't seem to have a lot of material or like game-changing gameplay to go with it. And I couldn't name an audience for the operator. I mean there was a way to name it, but when I named the audience, I felt like that audience was already in the game and the goal was to find a brand new one. So I decided to reach out for help and try to see if somebody had any idea where this operator could fit. And then I also wanted somebody to tell me I was wrong, because I had the suspicion, but I wanted the confirmation before I ditched the idea completely. I talked to a professor at first and he tried to like validate my idea, but I was still iffy with it. He was trying to pitch like trying to tell a story in the hallucinations, but knowing the pacing of Rainbow Six Siege, like there wasn't a lot of time for doing that. And then I talked to this producer that I know. He used to work at Magic. Some people know JV. And he thankfully did tell me that I was making the wrong decision with this operator and I should go back to the drawing board. This was also pretty close to the deadline. This was probably 2 days before the deadline. So then I decided to take a look at the problem space, because that was probably going to be a good place to try to branch off to a new operator. So when I was asking people about operator stuff, there was something that I noticed. First off, Reddit doesn't validate anyone. And then a few people dropped the game early on. That was a running pattern. And even I dropped the game back in 2016. My brother reminded me that my dad, who played a lot of FPSs, dropped the game as well. And I was like, why are people dropping this game? So I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why I didn't like defense. And then I started thinking about onboarding, because that was kind of a trend that was popping up. And again, I was wishing I had more time with attack. So then I started thinking about trying to build a character that would grant players more time on attack. And that's when I started to actually pick my audience, which was kind of a ballsy choice in my opinion, but I decided to target new players as an audience since there was such a problem with retention rate. So I was able to get here from noticing the like problem and trend with retention rate. I also spun it so it could lean towards strategic or defensive attackers. But the primary audience was new players. And now that I have my audience, I had to find my hook. So Rainbow does have beginning operators or beginner operators. Fun fact about my copy of Rainbow that they sent me, I actually didn't have access to the operators, but I also wasn't unfamiliar with them. I only had access to like any operator besides the beginning ones. But what I knew about those operators, they didn't really increase playtime on attack. And then I thought about this rule where you only get one life, and if you die, you're dead. And then I decided to challenge that and try to figure out how do we give players instead a second chance in the game. This is an actual shot of my PowerPoint that I submitted to Ubisoft. I did say, stay with me here to them. So they have one character where you kind of get a second wind. That 1 HP might not be true, but she when she gets knocked down, she has a chance of coming back with very low health. But that didn't seem like enough to me for a new player. I wanted something more. And I had to be careful because I had to do this without making veterans upset about changing like the whole one life rule. But I still wanted to give players a second chance and I wanted to stay true to the game. So I decided to try to discreetly give players a second life by giving that operator its own kind of two-phased combat where the operator first sends out a robot. When that robot dies, the actual like operator of the robot runs in to help. So after I figured out my hook, I had to define what my goals were with this operator. So you want it to feel natural to the gameplay. If the operator breaks the established feel of Siege, veterans will get upset. Siege has a very particular flow to it, and it's important to maintain that. You want to introduce new gameplay strategies, and if the operator doesn't challenge the existing systems, what's the point in adding them? Siege's replayability stems from the hundreds of scenarios that players are placed in, and the operator needs to add to that. Also, we want to assure that we give players time to learn. So again, Siege has operators that are intended for people new to the game, but none that give you a chance to step back and reflect on what's going on because of how fast the match ends for those new players. So I had to figure out how this operator fits with the game. I started thinking about roles. I started thinking about similar operators. I started thinking about what the operator could challenge and what it could counter and what could be a challenge for the operator themselves. I was also thinking about like how this fits in with actual warfare. Bots aren't foreign to counter-terrorist operations, which is counter-terrorist operations are the theme of Rainbow Six Siege. The bot could be used as an intel gatherer, and like the player could control the bot and like using the mic, just tell players what's going on while they're sneaking around, and like they could split off or they could stay close to the other player. There were a lot of strategies that could be played with here. And I was already starting to like choose roles that fit out of like the 19 sub roles. And then I had to define a play style and gameplay. I had to envision what the step-by-step match would look like for somebody playing this character. So I had to define my play style, and I decided to go with like short bullet points, strategic, because it would open up players to different playing styles, since you start as a robot that's intended to do one thing and you rush in as an operator that's intended to do another thing, so you kind of switch roles in the middle of the game. I consider it forgiving because the two-stage system essentially gives the player another life and time to reflect on errors. I called it intuitive because the camera encourages the player to communicate and plan with their teammates. And then cautious because the player gets to be in the scenario before actually deploying the person operator. And then reliable because the team knows that with that operator, there is going to be backup on its way. So my playstyle goals were to make this two-stage gameplay, make onboarding helpful, come up with new strategies, and also have like an impactful turning point, because I could totally see like once that robot is done in the heat of like the match, having somebody come in and like trying to take down other enemies would feel like a very big moment for the teaming, would probably be a turning point for in some instances. I had to think about strategies. In Rainbow, you could tag enemies so that other players can know where they are. I consider the robot to be a distractor or finisher because I wanted to give the robot some ammunition, but not enough to kill anybody on its own. Just enough to distract or finish someone. The robot could actually act as a bomb or a breach. You could like drive the robot up to a group of people and explode, and when it maybe insta-kill, but it would do significant damage. Breaching is a mechanic in Rainbow Six, if you're not familiar with it, where you just break walls and stuff to kind of peek in and see where other enemies are. A lot of environmental stuff is destructive in that game. And also, one strategy is to not be the first really to enter the scene as this robot. As this idea came across when I was trying to think about how this robot would enter a barricade, and you don't want to explode your robot right away, so it's probably going to hang back in the beginning and then branch off once inside with teammates. You should also consider what the size of your character is going to be, what the movement's going to be like, what the sound is going to be in game, what interactions it's going to have, how the user interface might change, and what narrative you could kind of branch off from here. I did start forming a narrative when I was in what I like to call the interrogation phase for this operator. They were kind of hammering me a little bit for a story, and I did start forming a story from the mechanics, but I held back in the slides because I didn't think that's what they wanted, and they didn't specify for a narrative. Also, in the first presentation, they were very clear to not go into too much detail about the operator yet, but I could kind of get a sense of the character from the mechanics that I had. Like, if once the robot dies, that other like human operator is worried about their team, so they're going to rush in and try to do what they can to help. And I felt like there was definitely like story potential there. I had to identify what roles would fit the operator, and I saw it as a flexible attacker. Both could be considered a flank and anti-roam. The bot, again, I've said a few times, intel gatherer and maybe in the front line, sometimes back line. And the person was more intended for crowd control and was more of a backline operator, mostly because they come in late game and the intention is to basically regain stability when the match is going a little off board. So, details and balance. I had to do more research. I looked at existing weapons and damage values. Found spreadsheets that a fan made on Reddit, and oh my god, they had a lot of time apparently. I mean, I was benefiting from it, but there were so many lines about weapons and stuff like that. Eventually, I learned I could be a little broad about what I wanted. I researched random weapons and military stuff online, probably on some watch lists now, but that's just how it's gonna be. When it came to balancing, I had the robot and I had the human operator, so I had to figure out how to balance this so it's not overpowering. So again, I consider the robot more of a distraction and intel gatherer. I gave it a low damage turret, so it's not going to do a lot of significant damage on its own. It's considered to be explosive and soft breach. Its speed is not too fast, but also not too slow. Gave it medium armor because heavy armor felt a little too OP for this bot. And then I gave it a little bit less than average health. Average health is around 100. So for the human, which is intended to be a turning point or impact, they have a delayed spawn. That was my initial pitch, was that they would, this operator would, the human part would only spawn when the robot was out of the match. That way the human can't just get killed off immediately. They could do high or widespread medium damage, and I decided to pick that by giving them like a shotgun or a machine pistol, so they could either do some damage to a lot of enemies or just a ton of damage to one enemy when they're rushing in. I also made a pump shotgun, so it delays the reload. I gave the human faster speed because they're trying to rejoin the team. Light armor, so they're a little easier to take down. I gave them average health. And again, the goal is to like gain control of the situation. So that's why they have higher damage weapons, but lower health. So they're not too overpowered when they're rushing in, because everybody else is already going to be low health once the human part of the operator comes in. Also, this operator does not start with the little spy turret. It felt fair since they already have a robot that they're starting with, and they still have that two-phased combat. It's just replaced with a different robot, and I didn't really have the robots spawn until the actual match started. So they don't really get to see the scene either in the beginning. Every operator has a primary weapon, secondary weapon, gadget, and unique ability. In this case, my operator's unique ability was a robot, and as a gadget, I only gave them a stun grenade and nothing else when they're the human, because they already have the robot that's going to either act as a bomb or it's going to act as a breach. Strengths and weaknesses. This one was interesting to figure out. I had to throw a lot of scenarios in my head. So I had to think about the cast of characters and consider their strengths and weaknesses. So below we have Ash, who can basically shoot a bomb. And then we have this robot. I think the bomb might win that fight a bit. I had to think about different hazards and stuff as well. I had to think about the distance between the enemy and the robot and how that affects combat and what those scenes would look like. So I had to talk about, if the robot was on close, the robot might appear as more of a threat to the player, but if the robot was farther away, it would definitely appear like less of a threat to the defender, especially if they could like throw an explosive at it or they have explosive set up as a trap. I also had to think about synergy encounters, which was kind of similar. Yeah, again, I had to run through team comps. I had to run through different traps and stuff like that and figure out how that was going to affect things. And yeah, I'm great at burning through presentations, but we have a question section now. And that's basically the overall of what I did for this challenge. And I won, by the way, in case you didn't know. So yeah, does anybody have any questions about like what I had to do, about the operator more, or general stuff?
I don't know. I just think that it's pretty rad that you won.
Thanks. I think it's rad too.
How did you first realize that there was like an issue with the first concept you had?
It was when I was trying to drive it to an audience. So I was like shown, I forgot what the term is for the chart, but there is a players type chart. And I know what type of player I am because of that chart. But when I was trying to draw it to audiences, I felt like those audiences already existed in the game. And because of that, it made me feel like it wasn't a strong enough design. So I decided to maybe start considering other options, but I didn't really formulate my new operator until like 2 days or 1 day before the challenge was due.
I see.
Yes, Mark, that's the chart, Bartel's taxonomy.
Thank you, Google, for that.
What part of this took the longest, or was maybe the hardest to complete?
I think the hardest part was probably the initial concept, because once I figured out what my objective was, it was a lot easier to start putting pieces together, and it felt natural because, again, my objective was to try to make the game a little bit easier to new players. There's also stuff built into this operator to make it appeal to veterans as well. That part was a little tricky to see how it would appeal to veterans, but I think everybody would like a little extra time on attack. So yeah, it was just coming up with the initial concept that took the longest.
Were you able to develop prototype versions of anything that you designed, or did you just kind of, how did you imagine how matches would go with this character?
It was all theoretical. In the original challenge, they did have people prototype it. If I had to do that, that would have been interesting given my schedule last semester. But because of COVID, they decided to not do the prototype one. They just decided to do what I kept calling like an interrogation, where they gave me like different scenarios and I had to think on my feet. And I actually did really well with that, which made me happy and also solidified that the design I had was pretty strong. Yes, Kenny, you're raising your hand. Nope. Okay.
No,
There
it
we
was. I just put it down because you went. So you mentioned that you came up with a narrative, but the Ubisoft people wanted you to keep it short. Would you mind sharing some of it now that we have like the design? Or
So like I had the narrative in my head and they like probed me for it during like the interview that they had. I didn't go into as much detail as I wanted to. I thought about naming the character Replay specifically because of the mechanic. I probably would have chosen a different name if I like put more thought into it. But I could very well see like a character being obsessive over like how they fight and stuff like that and wanting to be a perfectionist. And I could see them getting really upset at their failure. So if their robot exploded for some reason or was like eliminated, I could see them rushing in after their teammates to help out because they're like that concerned about their teammates. I could see the character as kind of reckless for that reason too, which also justifies the lower armor and kind of like the less preparation that character had.
cool. Thanks.
How was it sort of designing, at least narratively, within a space that someone had sort of already predefined? Did you find that more like restrictive, or was it, I don't know? It
was a mixed bag. So I had to figure out the environment of Rainbow first. That took some time. And again, like one of the first things I said that I noticed was that they were actually open to a little more fictional designs, which surprised me. I didn't really dive into all of the psychological reports of the operators that they randomly have because there's 58 operators. I skimmed some of them. I thought it was really interesting. I felt like some of the operators like their stories definitely related to their abilities, which kind of made the narrative feel a little more natural when I started coming up with it. But the mechanics were definitely like a gateway towards that narrative, which I thought was really cool. Any other questions?
If not, this is a pretty good place to end. It's 7:40ish. We could either move into the Discord for project sharing or hang out. Yeah, thank you. Can you end the recording actually?
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
No problem. Glad to share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had to make like the first PowerPoint I had to do. We weren't allowed to put our name on it or anything, and we had to like overload it with information. So it was like really interesting to see the structure of that presentation. And then the second one, we had to do a PowerPoint again, but we had to record a video over it. Well, just audio over it. And their time range for that was like 30 minutes.
But the question is, are you winning, son?
Well, I did win.
Yeah, I know.
So
you did
yes.
How many people did you compete against?
It was confusing when I asked them. I think they said in the first round they took in 30 people, and they only chose 2 people out of those 30.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I really want to know who the other person is because I want to know what their operator's like.
Kenny wants to know if you found just the right sniper.
There is one character with a sniper in Rainbow who is on attack, but I did not really get to play them because I said it's attack. You don't have a lot of time.
Glaz, maybe?
It's
It's not Glaz.
I don't think it's Blaz. I feel like her name might start with a K.
Oh goodness. Give me a minute.
Are you doing research for your next fanfic?
Oh my god.
Yeah, I'm getting the details together. Don't you worry.
Jesus Christ.
I'm aiming for a spring
Collie?
release.
Yes,
Is
it's
Collie the only
Collie.
sniper? Okay.
Yeah, it has to be Kali then.
Yeah, I wanted to main her, but she's kind of difficult to start out with. But I really, really, really wanted to play as a sniper.
Isn't Rainbow mostly like close quarters combat?
Yeah, it was kind of a bold thing for them to add a sniper to the game. I think the reason why they wanted to add a sniper was more because of like the quick scopers and stuff. And so
Also,
they put it
apparently
in.
creating problems.
Yes.
Because you're running around in the halls and then you get sniped and you're just like, what the fuck? I got sniped? I wasn't expecting that. And then the guy pops up and goes, yeah, you weren't expecting that. It's the element of surprise.